Hey guys, this is Nate with BleepinJeep. Today I'm going to show you how I make an old engine run like a new one. Today we're going to be working on my mother-in-law's 61 Willys pickup truck. Thing is sweet. But before we get started, make sure you like the video and subscribe to our channel. The engine we're going to be working on today is a inline 6 called the Jeep Tornado. These used to be very popular, very famous. These days, probably a lot of Jeep owners have never even heard of it. But they're good little engines. My mother-in-law bought this truck because it's a sweet, almost done truck. It is a runner and a driver. It just needs some help from her son-in-law. So you're going to see some of this in upcoming videos. I'd like to clean up this ugly wire harness and a few other things just to make this truck right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by making the engine run right. And so I've got 5 tips that anybody can do to almost any engine in order to make sure that they're getting the most out of their engine. First thing I want to do is clean out this intake and carburetor. So I need to take this truck, flip it around with the exhaust headed out the door of the shop, and that way when all this nonsense gets pushed out of the exhaust as we're running it, it'll all go out there instead of in here. This engine starts rough and idles like crap. And if you listen close, you're going to hear a little bit of a tick. That idle is bouncing all over the place. It's ticking. So to me, this is an indicator that the valves need to be adjusted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill it with a product called Seafoam. Seafoam is not sponsoring this video. I just really like their spray because I think it cleans really well. So we're going to spray a whole bunch of Seafoam in this thing. We're going to kill the engine, and then we're going to do all of our maintenance stuff while the engine is soaking in that Seafoam. And hopefully when we adjust these valves, we can get rid of that tick, and this thing's going to run a little bit better once we start it back up. In order to kill the engine with Seafoam, we need to remove the air cleaner. I don't particularly like this style of air cleaner. This is old school. This is what's called an oil bath air cleaner. So the air gets sucked through a bunch of oil in order to filter it. We'll see if I can talk my mother-in-law into doing a conventional paper air cleaner. This stuff isn't available everywhere, but you can definitely get it online. The spray is a lot harder to find than Seafoam. You can get Seafoam pretty much anywhere these days, even Walmart. The spray this is my favorite spray to clean up carburetors, or I use this in diesel engines, I use this in gas engines, I use this in everything. It comes with this straw, which is shaped like this, so you can hook to it. You can, in a modern car, you can take and you can slide this into one of your intake hoses, and you can take a hose clamp down around it, and as you're running the engine, you can spray it in there. It's pretty slick. That way you can get behind your mass airflow sensor and whatnot. We don't need this shape. We don't need this little guy because we're basically just going to be spraying this right into the top of the carburetor. When you do this, you're going to see a whole bunch of white smoke as it's digesting the different carbon deposits and digesting the cleaner itself. So we've got the cleaner running through the system right now. I'm going to let it run for a minute or so, and then we're going to spray so much into it that it's going to kill the engine. Well, this is the first for me. I couldn't kill the engine with the Seafoam, so I actually had to go turn it off. Now I'm spraying a whole bunch of the seafoam in there with it off, because we want this to really soak in and loosen up any sort of deposits. I'm going to save just a little bit so I can hook a straw up to it, and I'm going to open up any of these vacuum ports after we get it running again, and I'm going to spray through the vacuum ports to make sure that we get the cleaner in there as well. But for now, I'm just going to spray a little bit more in here, just to make sure a bunch of it's sitting in there so it can help to loosen up any of these deposits and help soften any of this gunk. I'm going to remove this valve cover so we can set the valve lash. Check out this cool old valve cover. They don't make them like they used to, man. New engine covers are boring. Plastic. This thing is cool. The way you adjust valves will vary from engine to engine. This is kind of a weird one. I've never seen them to where you can just like wiggle these things out of adjust. To me, that seems like it must be too loose, but I guess we'll find out here in a second. So when there's pressure, you see the lobe comes up. When there's pressure on the valve, you can't adjust it, because what we're doing is we're going to stick our feeler gauge in between the cam and this rocker arm, which goes to the valve. So on this side, the exhaust side, we can adjust it. We can put the feeler gauge in there. You can see this one's loose, this one's loose, and that one's obviously loose. But any of them that are tight, we can't do yet. So what we're going to do is, with the engine in this position, I'm going to go through and I'm going to stick my feeler gauge for 0.006 for the intake and 0.008 for the exhaust. We're going to adjust them down to spec. As I go along, I'm going to take a paint pen, and after I adjust it, I'm going to put a white mark on it. Then I'm going to go bump the starter, and we're going to turn this thing over just a little bit so we can loosen up the other ones and adjust them too. I bumped the starter, the thing fired right up, which I was not expecting. We definitely don't want to run it with the valve cover off because it'll shoot oil all over the place, but I was able to kill it right away so there's no oil anywhere. But now we should have, a couple of these other ones are now ready to be adjusted that I couldn't adjust before. Here's one, here's another one. So I'm going to adjust these other ones that I can, paint them, and then if there's any left, I'll bump the starter one more time, and hopefully that'll free up the last couple. Now that we have these valves adjusted, I can rule this out as a potential problem as to why this thing's not running right, and as to why it's got that weird tick. This is something that almost every engine that I've adjusted the valves on has run way better, because this gets neglected. There's a lot of engines that require it like every 3,000 miles, old Volkswagens and stuff, you know, they want you to do them a lot. So now that these are adjusted, I want to get to the next step, which would be I'm going to pull all these spark plugs. We're trying to do this as cheap as possible for my mother-in-law, and so I'm going to pull all these spark plugs. I'm going to clean them and re-gap them. A lot of people would just put new ones in there, but like I said, we're trying to go cheap. Now, whenever I pull these out, if I see a spark plug that looks like that cylinder's not burning correctly, I'm going to put a white dot on the boot, and then whenever I go to reassemble everything and I get the engine running again, if I still have an issue, I know which ones looked weird, and then I can put my compression tester on that cylinder and just see if there's like low compression or anything like that going on. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these boots, and I'm going to start re-gapping these spark plugs. I'm going to do these one at a time. Just by looking at it, this looks like it's gapped a little bit too big, but we'll see. And it's not really that dirty, but I'm going to spray it up with some seafoam anyway, clean it up a little bit, and then double check the gap at 030 is what they say this engine needs. Perfect. Spark plugs are gapped. Valves are readjusted. I'm ready to put this back together and fire it up. Even with all that seafoam in there, fire it right up, but you can see it's working a bunch of it out, because there's going to be a whole lot of it in that intake manifold and all throughout the carburetor. Now I'm going to look and see. I don't see any vacuums on this thing, which is kind of surprising, but either way, I was going to take and put the straw for that seafoam in one of the vacuums and spray that in there real good, but I don't really see a need to. Things already idling better. You can see, oh yeah, as it's warming up, it's getting a little bit more of that sea foam coming out. So I'm gonna let this idle for a little while, and then we're gonna go take it for a spin. This bad boy is running way better. Whenever I burp the throttle, every time the idle comes down, it's at like a different RPM. This is something that I've had multiple vehicles that do this, and the reason is because no one ever went in and they didn't set up the idle screw properly. And so I like my vehicles to idle a little bit on the high side and like the 850 to 900 RPM range. This doesn't have a tach, so I have no idea what it's going to be idling at, but one thing I can tell you is that right now it's way too low, and so it's kind of idling up and down and it's doing some weird stuff. And if all we did is push it up just a little bit, it smooths out so much. And so you're gonna notice that when you're in the cab and you're at a stoplight and everything else. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and I'm gonna adjust the stop, which is a little screw right here, and I'm just gonna keep turning this in. I'm just gonna keep turning this screw in until the idle comes up to where I feel like there's very little vibration coming from the engine and very little vibration in the cab. Now we're gonna pour some of the seafoam cleaner right into the tank. So as my mother-in-law drives this for the next few weeks, as she burns through the tank, it's going to continue to clean out the insides of that carburetor and the rest of the fuel system. This little truck's pretty dang cool. You know, it's got an exhaust leak or something because it's a little bit loud, but it feels so much more powerful now that we cleaned it up and got it running right. So I'm on my way up to the auto parts store that's local to me, and I'm gonna just get some stuff to clean up the air cleaner. That's got like an oil bath style air cleaner, so I'm gonna clean it up for her and just do some of the basic, you know, oil change, just stuff like that, so we can make sure that this truck stays reliable for a long time to come. Whether you have a gas or a diesel engine, there is timing that concerns you. With a diesel engine, you've got an injection pump, and the timing of your injectors is the timing that you're going to be concerned with. With a gas engine, you're going to be concerned with the timing of your spark. So I looked it up. The factory spec is going to be 5 degrees before top dead center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire this up. I'm going to hook it up to the #1 spark plug, and I'm gonna look and see if it's just a little bit, you know, if it looks like it's 5 degrees-ish, I'm not gonna mess with it. But if it looks like it's way off, or it looks like it's dead center of that timing mark on the block, then I'll mess with it a little bit and see if I can get it to idle even smoother. And that's it. This little truck is pretty much ready to go. The only thing that I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the oil. Every time I pull a valve cover off of an engine, I change the oil, so I'm going to do that for my mother-in-law, and then I'm going to put a new fuel filter in it, and I'm going to change out the, I'm going to wash the air cleaner and put new oil in it and everything like that. A lot of people probably don't know, old school engines use an oil bath style air filter. So I'm going to do all that stuff for her, and this should be a pretty fun, reliable little truck for her to drive around all summer. If you like this video and you learned anything, make sure you click the thumbs up button. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We have a whole bunch of content like this, all how-to stuff, some adventure stuff. And if you can, please support us on Patreon. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at BleepinJeep Nate. We'll see you next time.